So in Carlisle Cathedral, this is an Anglican cathedral in the very north of England, close to the border of Scotland. A bishop was buried in the cathedral. His name was Bishop Bell. And you can go there and you can see his tomb. And interred, I think it was 1496, he was buried there. And there were these brass strips or inlays in his tomb. And around some of the brass inlays, there are creatures that have been engraved on the brass. Now, if you look at these, you can clearly make out what they are. I've got them there. But now, they're not entirely exactly or accurate representations, but it's pretty clear to make out what they are. We've got a bat, we've got a fish, we've got a dog. And notice with the dog here, it's got a collar on, so it's probably representing somebody's pet, a bird. But then when we go over, we have this interesting depiction. And we have, I believe, 2 necking sauropods. Now, notice the tails. We already discussed that sauropods have a large tail. This one over here, the tail is quite plain. Look at the spikes on this tail and the cleft. There are only 2 dinosaurs with this feature, but most likely we think it's this sauropod by the name of Shunnosaurus. So the engraver has given us enough detail on the tail for us, I believe, to say this is unlike any other creature except a Shunnosaurus. So again, when was this? 1496.
Well after these things should have been dead.
Exactly. So I think, that's a really good example. There's another one that often comes up, and there's been a lot of debate about this. This is in Cambodia, and people have probably heard about the huge Angkor Wat complex. Angkor Wat is not a temple. It's a massive kind of city where there are lots of different temples. But in a temple called Ta Prohm, there's a pillar with these sculptures and engravings in there. And elsewhere on the pillar, we immediately recognize there's a human, there's an iguana, there's a deer, but then we get this creature here. And you can see it's got these bony or plates on the back, and it looks suspiciously like a Stegosaurus. And in fact, myself and other CEOs, we had an international meeting in Cambodia some years ago, and on one of the days off, we went out to look at the temple to see if we could go and have a look at this. And we were all saying, well, we don't know where to find it. It's so massive. And I said, well, let's just ask one of the local guides. And I just said to him, do you know where the Stegosaurus is? And he goes, oh, yeah. So even they recognize that people are recognizing this as a Stegosaurus. Now, some have said, for example, that these, what we think are bony plates on the back, might be decorations like lotus leaves or something else. But in all of the other depictions that we recognize as real animals, I mean, they're realistically depicted so that we know what they are, we don't see those illustrations. And a closer look, actually, when you get to the side of this engraving, because it's etched into it, these bony plates are actually on the back. They're actually on the back of this creature. They're not recessed as if a background decoration. So clearly the artist meant to display these as part of the creature. And simply, if I remove those, I would say, what else are we looking at? Is it mythical? Well, why put a mythical creature when everything else is real? Or if it's unrealistically portrayed, that doesn't fit with what else we're seeing there. Now, there are some features of it that don't fit a Stegosaurus, but, we've previously written on creation.com, we could be looking at a subvariant or another subspecies or something like that. Some have suggested that it might be an Asian rhino, but, we don't see Asian rhinos with long tails as well. So, we are looking at a glass fairly dimly when we look at these, and I believe there is some room for different interpretation. But I think what I'm saying there is we should neither be dogmatic that they are or they aren't. The point I'm making is there are hundreds of illustrations all around the world in different forms of creatures that look suspiciously like dinosaurs that we know from the fossil record. We're trying to interpret what is the sculptor or the artist trying to portray, right? We were not there to see it. So I've just recently come back from China.
All right.
And in the temples there, they have lots and lots of creatures representing all sorts of things. Now, everything in China has meaning. I'm going to show you a picture here. All right. And I'm going to say to you, let me turn that around. What do you think that looks like?
It looks remarkably dragon-like, but not quite, no wings.
It's actually a lion.
Oh.
and this is a modern representation, but we do see much, much older ones, but they're very consistent in their portrayal. So a lion was a symbol of power and authority, and they're always pictured out the front of the temples to ward off evil spirits in their belief system. So when I look at that, I couldn't make out that's a lion, but it is. My point here is it's been stylistically represented in terms to do the job that it's meant to do, to scare off evil spirits. Doesn't look like a lion that we know today, but that's what they are. That's what they were represented as, or written as consistently when you see them, lions. And here's another one. This is a tortoise. I mean, look how fearsome it looks. It doesn't look like a tortoise today. Again, it's there to do a specific job. Now, interestingly, the Chinese, one of the foremost countries when it comes to calling some ancient creatures dragons.
Yes.
And they're all over the place. You see these dragon depictions on temples, on the floors. Sometimes you see them with wings, etc. Now, dragons were a symbol of power in China and also there to control the weather. So they would even give offerings to these dragons because they wanted a good harvest or something like this. Now, it's interesting, in the Chinese zodiac, okay, you've probably heard that they might have a year of the pig, a year of the rooster, a year of the dog. There are some others there, a rat, ox, horse, tiger, snake, monkey. Now, they're all real creatures that we know, but they also have in the Chinese zodiac a year of the dragon, right? So why would we have, again, all of these real creatures in the Chinese zodiac, and then they mention a dragon, which, apparently, according to evolutionists, must be something mythical. Remember I said the word dinosaur was a modern word?
Yes.
Why are we talking about dragons? Because this seems to be the word, and we've seen it in many countries and many cultures that they used this word dragon to depict some sort of ancient creature that we don't necessarily see today. But in people's minds, because of movies and that type of stuff, when we hear dragon, we tend to think of it as some sort of mythical creature. And there's another point there too. We have a lot of writings from ancient China, and emperors, it tells us that they used to have dragon breeders and dragon rearers or trainers within their court. And there are depictions of creatures that look suspiciously like small sauropods, for example, actually even pulling chariots in China. So clearly the Chinese, it seems from everything that we see there, they're referring to real creatures. What are they? We have depictions of them. And again, some of them are stylistic like this, but they certainly look like dinosaurs and a great range of dinosaurs as well.
Yeah, and it wouldn't really make sense to have dragon trainers and tamers if there was no dragons to tame or train. That would just be a fictitious, position to hold.
Yeah, why write about them? And then they're also included, as I say, in the Chinese zodiac, along with all those other creatures that are absolutely real. There's another one that we've probably all heard of too, which is St. George and the Dragon. This is a story of an English knight. Just here, this is the flag of Wales, which has this dragon emblem on it. And, often Welsh sporting teams are kind of known as the Dragons, etc. Now, the English flag has a red cross on it, okay, and that's known as the Cross of St. George. So who was St. George? So St. George was the story of, and I've got to get my dates right here, it goes back to Libya, North Africa, where apparently he killed this hissing dragon in a cave. And so it's gone down throughout history. He's celebrated, it's a sign of chivalry when you talk about St. George, etc. And all over Europe, you'll see different depictions of St. George killing this dragon-like creature. Now, some of the depictions look very realistic in terms of they look like creatures that we know to be dinosaurs. And I want to show you something here, because in a past episode of Creation magazine, there was an article featured here that when they looked at depictions of St. George, so I'll turn around so you can see it. So here's a classic one you might see in a church window, for example. But other artists around Europe, when they were obviously asked to recreate for their churches or their monuments the story of St. George and the Dragon, they drew dragons that they were familiar with. And here are the range, just some of the range of dinosaurs that have been depicted around Europe as representing dragons. So the point there is, they might not have seen the actual dragon that St. George killed, but when they were asked to represent a dragon, they represented dragons that they knew about.
Dragons that they'd seen.
Yes, and they look like dinosaurs that we see, again, from the fossil record. So there are more and more. There's a fantastic book called Dire Dragons that people can get on creation.com, and it specifically deals with all of these examples of where humans have probably seen dinosaurs. And the book is called Dire Dragons. Remember, that's the name that the ancients would have called them.
So, Gary, we've talked about 5 different points of why dinosaurs couldn't have existed millions of years ago. I see that there's been a book on this table this entire time. Could you tell us a bit about what that could actually mean for us in further readings or understanding?
Yeah, well, we have only been speaking for an hour or so and covered briefly, but there is lots and lots of information on what I spoke about today. If people care to search it out, go to creation.com, type in dinosaur soft tissue, carbon-14 and dinosaur fossils on creation.com. They'll get some. But in these podcasts, the ministry is really generous in making resources available for people to get more information. So this is a key book, a core book that the ministry produces called the Creation Answers book. And it kind of is the most asked questions we get. And no surprise, dinosaurs fills one of those chapters in here. So in 20 chapters, there are actually over 60 questions answered. Okay. Who did Cain marry? Where did the races come from? How do we see distant starlight from millions or billions light years away if we believe that the universe, according to the biblical age, is only thousands of years old? So, and to be honest, people often with these podcasts will put in questions there that they think creationists haven't thought of or answered. But in my experience, they generally have been pretty much covered already. And so this is a great book to do that. So they're going to make that available, I believe, in an ebook form. That'll be in the description below. So that's available, and just fill out your details and you can get a free ebook.
Link in the description. Grab your free ebook, especially if you have any questions that may arise about creationism or dinosaurs for this matter. Well, Gary, thank you for your time and your knowledge. It's been really insightful. I honestly think I've walked away with so much more knowledge about dinosaurs, and let's be honest, carbon-14 dating. I didn't even really know how that worked, but thank you for your time again.
You're welcome.